So, hello everybody. It's midnight, my local time, and your local time may differ. So it's using TLS in applications working group session, and let's start. So this is not well. So just a reminder for you that the session is being recorded, and what I was saying is under some legal issues on IETF. So meeting details. Chairs Leif Johansson is not able to attend, so I am your chair today, and our responsibility Francisco Colombini, and here are links for meeting slides, notes, and journal. And we need to perform some administrative tasks. So the sheets are corrected automatically, but we need volunteers for scribing Java, one Java scribe, and 2 note takers. So anybody?
I can take minutes in the other pad, although I have some comments on some of the presentations. So maybe if you can find another person to just cover.
Thank you, Alexei. And
I can also make some notes at the Etherpad, help out a little bit.
Okay, thank you, Hannes. And what about JavaScript? Do we need it? Do we need this person?
Hey, this is Rich. I'll do it. Expect you probably don't need it, but I'll do it.
Okay, thank you, Rich. So this is agenda for today, and we need 2 presentations. Quite length. Well, we have only 1 hour a session, so we have 2 presentations and short open mic. So anyone want to bash agenda? Okay, let's go. So this is a quick update of document status. So working group drafts. We have 3 drafts currently. It's the first draft is 7125 bis. It has been developed with a good pace, and on GitHub I can see that there were 99 closed issues, and I think that the author thinks that the draft is close to the working group last fall. And another draft is TLS 1.3 profile for Internet of Things, and it has been developed quite well recently, probably not with such a pace that we hold, and I'm a bit concerned with the lack of discussion on the list. But anyway, the draft is been developed. And the third working group draft is 6125 bis, and it was adopted not long ago. And first, it was a modest intention just to change common name, relative distinguished name from certificates representation in TLS to subject alternative names. It is proper, more proper way of represented TLS names. But then, following our AD advice, the group decided to update 6125. RFC 6125, and hopefully well, we were lucky that original authors agreed to co-author along with Rich of this draft, and it was discussed very much on the working group, and it was lively discussion of using wildcard certificates. So the draft is been developed very well. So I think that's all for update. So we have, well, the first presentation is for 6125B's draft. So I will share slides, just a moment.
Okay.
Okay,
All right.
so Rich,
Success.
go ahead.
Thank you. Success. Midako can hear me. All right. My name's on here because I did the slides, but Peter and Jeff, as Valerie said, are being co-authors. Jeff is out on leave/vacation until September, but actively participated in some of the discussions we had before then. So next slide, please. All right. Changes we made, kind of repeating what Valerie said. It's now a complete replacement, not a diff document. Peter and Jeff agreed to be co-authors. Grateful to them and for that. The current draft matches the older adopted document. I made some changes, pushed them out, and that's what's currently in the data tracker. So I have a few ideas for things like to float past the committee, the working group, and some discussion. So next slide, please. All right, these are the planned editorial changes. There were a couple of paragraphs on the directory as 500,
Sorry.
about it being the underpinning of RFC 5280 and PKIC certificates. I think while it was the theoretical underpinning, it's really not anymore. Nobody considers a global interoperable directory a requirement or even used. So I want to remove the directory text. That also takes out some rather ponderous cross-references to ISO and ISO documents.
Sorry, Rich. I can see Alexei in the queue. So Alexei, do you want to make a comment, or do you want to make a comment after each presentation? Question?
Quick clarifying question. So the text about directory, it does two things. It sort of has a bit of history, which is probably not relevant, but it also explains DNs and common names and all of this. Do you want to keep the part that explain the common names? Because I think the idea was that you don't have to go and to dig into LDAP documents to figure out what they are if you're not familiar with context.
Well, actually, I want to get rid of the only thing I want to say about the only thing I think we should say about common names is don't look at them.
Okay.
So I think it can safely go. And also, yes, that gets rid of the LDAP references as well. And the whole concept of, leftmost, rightmost, closest to the endpoint as opposed to the root.
And Victor?
Okay. I suppose I would like to see how it looks in the change.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Perhaps all of the relevant material isn't 5280, I guess. But I mean, ultimately, one needs to understand things like authority key identifiers and all that wonderful stuff, and name constraints. But mostly, I think here we can maybe get away with leaving it to 5280 by reference.
Thanks. Okay. All right, the next bullet, if this is a standard, the previous document, 6125, was a standard. I misinterpreted it. I thought it was a BCP document. But I think there's a lot of simplifications we can do to the text, certainly float them past the you know, the working group before doing it. There's a lot of constructs like, if a specification is using this standard, then blah, blah, blah. Or a standard may use this and then do other things. I think we should basically, you know, want to narrow this down to use the subject alternate names field, and that's the rule. We'll discuss that on the list, but I think it may not just, I can see where some people may not see it's just editorial, but that's also something I'm planning on doing in future versions of the draft, assuming the working group agrees. There's some discussion about block quote formation, about implementation notes and security concerns. I think those could either be inlined or just removed. But again, these are things I'd like to do. I have sample text. It's in the form of pull requests, but I will post them to the list. Okay, next.
Sorry, Alexei, are you in the queue? Do you want to say something, or is it just left over? Okay.
This is an editorial change that I hope we can figure out what to make at the level of bike shedding, I guess. That's a lot of words. Hopefully we can cut it down. Any suggestions? If people have something, we can discuss it in the list, but yeah, Sean?
Sean?
You can truncate TLS down to just TLS. We got that added in the RFC editor's queue of shorter things, but I don't know. I can help you with the rest of it.
Yeah, great. Sure. Anything. I recognize it's very accurate, but it's not something you can easily refer somebody else to. Okay. I also want to discuss that on the list. Next. So these are things that definitely need consensus about. I think we have consensus around the first one, but you know, I guess the chairs call it. Nobody was opposed to just making it, you know, the asterisk is the wildcard character can be only the first component of a DNS name, as opposed to, you know, star foo or star www.example.com. Do I just go ahead and make that change? Do we need to do I mean, how do we handle that? And Valerie?
Well, from what I see from the discussion on the list, I think that there is a consensus, and because nobody opposed, and for different reasons, well, everyone agreed to this. And we can issue a formal consensus call, but actually I don't see a need for this unless someone strongly prefer to have some, I don't know, formal procedure for it. But actually, I think there is a consensus for wildcards. And what about, okay, and what about standard track and BCP?
Yeah,
I have no opinion. Okay.
Yeah, that was my mistake. It was originally, you know, it was an AD-sponsored standards track document. Peter had reminded me of that. So I think the second bullet is moot, is a no-op. The third one is there's a fair amount of discussion about pinning. And pinning is when an application ideally presents to the user, oh, this cert has, for whatever reason, expired or has a different name than the server you're trying to connect to. Should I still use it? And the steps for processing include if you find a match, if you don't find a match and something is pinned, or if you find a match and there's nothing pinned, what do you do? So I'm curious what the working group feels about the putting pinning in here, given that we're mainly focused on verify what to do and how to verify names and certs.
So, Alexei?
I find pinning to be useful in the same document. because it sort of covers the same area of the code from your TLS cert verification callback. I mean, you're right. You can make an argument that it's not necessarily quite right, but I find it useful as an implementer. But
Okay.
I'm biased because IAG sponsored this document in the past.
So Watson,
pinning creates problems. I think we should drop it. I think even better, we should explicitly recommend against it. The number of times that it creates issues, it creates problems, especially when pinning the publicly trusted certs, it creates issues for being able to distrust CAs. It's not a great situation.
okay, Victor.
I also support pinning as out of scope for this document. It should only specify how to verify a cert. If you want to pin, that can be specified elsewhere or not at all. Doesn't belong here.
Yeah, the other, I'm also opposed to it because, like Watson said, it does create security and trust issues, and it encourages users to click through diagnostics. But I think we should take it to the list and confirm.
Yes, sure. Please take it to the list.
Will do. Okay, next slide.
It's the last.
That's okay. Great. I ran it. Yeah, I'm done. If there's questions or discussion.
So please continue discussion on the list, and we have very lively discussions recently, and I think this document will progress quite quickly. Oh, Victor, please go ahead.
So I think we closed that discussion. There was some conversation around maybe getting rid of wildcards entirely, and I think the consensus ultimately was that we can't, but maybe a few words of caution can be added to say that wildcards should be avoided if at all possible, that while they have their uses, they should not be used casually. I don't know whether that's too controversial a position to take, but they certainly weaken the guarantees that a certificate provides to you.
Sure. They do have, there is a particular specific section in the security considerations, and there's forward references to it about some of the security issues around wildcard certs. And I wasn't, we shouldn't get rid of that, but maybe if you get a chance, take a look at that and see if there's more words we need to add. But yes.
Or even, Victor, if you can provide the text that will satisfy you, the text candidate, it will be great. So, Peter?
Hey, I have a question, a clarifying question for Victor in the chat. He said that we were talking about standards in BCP, and he said standard. So I was curious if he meant that he thinks we should actually go from proposed standard to standard and advance this on the maturity level.
So I'm not suggesting that full standard is a good idea at this time.
Okay, thanks.
That's proposed, not BCP.
Okay, so I see no one in the queue, so we can go further and start with the next presentation. So I think Peter.
Yes. Thanks for making the time for us. I think Yaron and Tomas might be here, but it's late for them, so I'm presenting. Next slide. So we had a bit of a hiatus. Yaron and Ralph and I had a bunch of activity around this like 18 months ago, and then sort of dropped the ball. And so we added Tomas Fasadi as a co-author. That has helped us move things along. We addressed a bunch of issues that we identified, several attacks, things like that. And I'll summarize those briefly for you all, and then we can talk about some of the open issues that we would like some feedback and further discussion on. So next slide. So we went through a bunch of things, you know, some recommendations around TLS 1.3, also some things about TLS 1.2. Obviously, we are not trying to kind of, with this, necessarily move people off of TLS 1.2. We're just trying to provide some best practices about how to use TLS 1.2. If you are looking for things that don't exist in TLS 1.2 very easily, you know, we have some things about that on the next slide, Cha-Cha 20 and so on. We're not trying to sort of get people to do those things in TLS 1.2. We're suggesting that people move forward to TLS 1.3 for those sorts of things. But rationales for all these things are, all these document updates are in the document, and we always try to provide a rationale for the things that we're suggesting in this spec. So please do take a look at the document to see why we're recommending certain things. And of course, you know, raise your hand here or bring it up on the list if you want to discuss those. So next slide, please. So there are a few things, as I hinted just now, that the authors went back and forth on, and didn't really have consensus amongst ourselves to make these changes. Specifically, Cha-Cha 20, Poly 1305, and an ECDSA cipher suite for TLS 1.2. Again, this is 1.2. And you know, we did some research, we poked around, we asked people who have maybe some numbers on this, and we didn't, especially with regard to Cha-Cha 20, Poly 1305, we did not get a definitive read that these things were widely enough used to really call this best current practice, or try to push people in this direction for TLS 1.2. And so we were kind of curious from the folks in the working group whether they think these are things that we should go ahead and try to suggest. But as the authors, we went back and forth on this and didn't have enough evidence that we could really push for this in 7525 BIS. So that's one thing. The other is, which I brought up on the list, I think late last week, is the stuff in the CNSA suggestions. I think the feedback we got on list was those might or might not be good things, but just taking someone's word on it from the NSA isn't necessarily the right thing to do. And if we do think, though, that some of these are important, we should, as we do for everything else, provide a rationale and some evidence. So I see Deb is here, and that would be helpful feedback. But I think some of the things some of the feedback we got was, you know, these look interesting, but maybe we need to do a little bit more investigation and write up some text that says, if we're going to take these on, why they are sort of best current practice now. So I will defer to the queue.
Well, Deb, go ahead.
I haven't done this yet this time. So I'm happy to help. If you want to take advice out of my draft, I'm happy to provide rationale. I'm happy to provide advice, you know, whatever you want. I don't follow Utah very much, so I hadn't seen that message. But okay. I'm happy to help if you want help.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Deb. I appreciate your offer, and it just sort of came to our attention recently, and so we haven't delved into it as the authors. And maybe I will start an email thread either on the Utah list or with you, so we can get a better understanding of some of these recommendations.
Okay, that's fine. I'm happy to help.
Much appreciated.
Watson.
Watson Ladd. My concern with recommend bigger RSA, fine. Recommend bigger DHE, fine. when it comes to ECDHA, there is a huge performance impact with moving to P38 4. It's not as well optimized as P256, harder to optimize for various reasons you don't need to get into. And there would need to be, I would need to see significant security justification, which isn't in the CNSA profile. I don't think it's a great basis for adopting it. And I think, increasing the RSA size, increasing the DHE size may be more justifiable.
Yeah, thanks, Watson. I think what I was seeing from the list discussion was some of these, like you say, even the RSA and DHE things, maybe point toward that, but don't necessarily say that you should do this yet. I'm not sure where, we haven't finished that discussion on the list, but I'm not sure that we're quite there yet. Not seeing anyone else in the queue. I don't think there maybe is just one other slide. I can't even remember, but
there is one. There is one
okay.
more.
Yeah. Okay. So yes. So I think the question is, where do we go from here? Tomas and Yaron and I have tried to be pretty thorough about what we have updated so far and trying to address a number of the attacks that are out there and so on. Something else might come up, but I think we as the authors feel that this is now pretty complete based on the current understanding of how people are using TLS in the field right now. Again, best current practice, we think we've kind of summarized everything. And so if folks have other things they want us to address, attacks we haven't heard of, things like that, it would be great to try to, I think, get that done in the next few months so that we can maybe request working group last call, as I say here, maybe around IETF112, before or after that, probably a little after, I don't know. I'll leave that up to the chairs. But I think we feel that this document is now in pretty good shape, modulo some of the discussions that are going on now on the list.
Yes, it's a good idea. So bring discussion to the list. And I sense that we probably need to consult TLS working group with regard to whether we need to add the recommendation for TLS and for TLS 1.2, because the intention, our bright future is TLS 1.3. So it is not clear for me, for example, whether we need to profile to add some recommendation, some specific cipher suite recommendation for TLS 1.2. And probably we need to consult TLS working group what they think about this, whether it's a good idea, or whether we need to encourage people to switch to 1.3 and not use 1.2 if possible. Well, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little early to. I haven't seen anyone write a draft yet that says don't use TLS 1.2. So I think the specific focus for Yaron and Tomas and I is simply that if you want some of these features that you might get, for instance, Cha-Cha 20 and Poly 1305, if you want those things, use TLS 1.3. Don't try to sort of, update your implementation, your 1.2 implementation or 1.2 deployment to get those necessarily. 1.3 is the place to get those. So that's kind of where we've ended up as the authors of this, that we think is a sensible way to go. But if the group says, we're seeing a lot of implementation of or deployment of these in the field with 1.2, and that might be something that we want to say this is a best practice for 1.2, and then 5 years from now or whatever, we've got a new update to this document and there's another document out there that says stop using 1.2, then this document's going to have to change. But this is kind of a, what do we do about 1.2 right now? And Rich is in the queue, so.
Rich?
Yeah, I totally agree with your reasoning. I mean, if you, how to configure a stock 1.2 and then saying, and if you want these things which are highly desirable, upgrade to 1.3. I mean, I think that's the least friction way to get people who have existing enterprise or other embedded deployments to get their security stronger. Yes, many of the 1.2 implementations have Cha-Cha Poly already, but many probably don't because it's a new feature, I don't need it. So here's how to make those basic features more secure, and if you really want better security, go to 1.3. And so, yeah, your reasoning makes a great deal of sense, and I fully support it.
Yes, that's quite my concern. And what about the second concern and citation from CNSA? I think that I agree that there must be some reasoning, some justification, because just citing CNSA recommendations, well, looks strange because it's a national standards that are applied to the United States, and unless we have some justification, well, I understand that they're used not only in the United States but everywhere, but I think that having a justification from Deb, so she agreed to help with having some reasoning is a very good idea. If we provide reasons for why this, if we cite this, if we reference this draft, we need some, if we give these recommendations, so we need some justification for them. So, Rich, please.
Yeah, in the chat, there's been discussions about the RSA, the DHE things are fine. P384 might have has concerns about efficiency and stuff. And again, I think we can address that the same way. P384 was in TLS 1.2, 255.19 and 448 were not. And say, look, if you want this level of security, by the way, go over there and do the other, upgrade your protocol. But yeah, I'm not sure what you want to say about the, P384 specifically, but I think stronger key lengths is, bigger keys is good, except for the time where it costs you too much CPU usage.
Alexei?
Stephen wanted us to relate to the mic. Has anyone looked at the docs referencing this PCP to check if there is anything we might break by accident? Sorry, cannot send audio at the moment.
Just to speak on behalf of myself as a co-author, and I don't think I'm speaking out of turn for Yaron and Tomas, we have not done an investigation of this. As Yaron said in the chat, there's a huge number of documents that reference this. They're both inside the IETF and outside the IETF. And we could go to Yari's tool and sort of look at the IETF ones, but we should do a little bit of that, I think. I couldn't promise that it would be comprehensive since there are a lot of documents out there that reference this. But I'd also be curious maybe from Stephen, if he has, when you say break things, do you have specific concerns in mind with regard to that?
So, Victor?
I had to drop off for a while, so I'm sorry if my comment is due to a misunderstanding and missing part of the slides. But I'm seeing here in the slide that's currently up, talk of raising the floor on RSA and EC to 3072-bit and 384 and so on. And my take is that this is quite unwise. If quantum resistance is a factor, it'll just as easily break these as it'll break the current 2048 and 256. And otherwise, the various extant root CAs are signed with 2048-bit RSA, and they're good for decades and are unlikely to get updated quickly. And the performance impacts are quite noticeable. And I don't see the ecosystem moving to 3072-bit or to P384, which is barely used anywhere. And so I think it would be imprudent to raise the floor so high that nobody bothers to pay attention to the document and sticks with the things that are performant and good enough.
Okay. Kiro?
A comment to Stephen's question. And I don't want it to sound like we are being reckless. On the contrary, we're quite conservative with the changes we're making, but we don't have the same kind of, we don't have full backward compatibility requirements in a BCP. So if 5-6 years ago we did not require ALPN or some other stuff, we can require it today. And obviously some people may not be compliant with the BCP, and that's fine. So it is an opportunity for us to, as Victor said before, to raise the floor.
So I see nobody in the queue. And thank you, Peter. Thank you, Jeroen. Thank you, Thomas. And I think...
Yeah, what I'm hearing, Valerie, just to interrupt, sorry, is that we've had a lively discussion in the chat, and you know, we might want to, sounds like we might want to bring some of that to the list just to get some closure on things. And that would help us close out some of these open issues that we have up here.
Okay, sure. Please bring this to the list. I just didn't follow.
Yeah, of course. No, we can go over. We can go over the you know, the chat transcript and you know, tease out some things, and I can promise to do that, and then you know, start or restart some threads on the email list to try to get closure on these.
Okay, good idea. So I think that we are done with our presentations. We have an open mic, and we are 20 minutes ahead of our time. So if anyone wants to just say something related to Chen, please go ahead.
Hi, so this might be flame bait, but I just thought I'd ask it anyways. After this current crop of documents is done, do we see that this working group will close?
I'm not sure. Well, I think it should be discussed with our responsible AG, and we discussed a little bit at the time Francesca step up as FTD, and the overall opinion was that this group may remain as a maintenance group because we have we see an adoption of TLS 1.3, and we anticipate an adoption of DTLS 1.3, and we think that some issues with these protocols may arise, and so there might be a need to update documents recommended of using how the protocols should be used in applications. But anyway, it's a question mostly to our AD, responsible AD. And well, now we have no plans to close the group. Well, not we. I mean, Francesca and the chairs. There are no plans to close the group immediately after these documents are shipped.
Okay,
But
thanks.
it depends. Okay. Hannes, please go ahead.
Hi, this is Hannes. Hope you can hear me. I wanted to briefly talk about the IoT version of the draft, which we didn't have on the agenda, but you mentioned it briefly at the beginning of the session. I will post, or I've added the link into the meeting minutes, and I will post it into the chat window. But there are 3 open issues, and one relates to a discussion in the DLS working group and also in some of the IoT groups on the AEAD limits that John Madsen sort of brought forward. That's something maybe in the CFRG group that would be worthwhile to discuss. Thomas also filed an issue on the respective CFRG document. Hasn't been addressed yet, so maybe that's a discussion there, with the conclusions being folded into the document in this group. There was also another issue that came up in the DLS working group on how to do the certificate revocation in long-lasting connections. So previously in 1.2, there was the session resumption, and some people used that to then sort of like kind of recheck certificate status. And so I think we need to add some text in explaining that some of those features have changed, and the approach for doing the certificate checking of connections that stay up very long needs to be done differently than before. And then the last open issue that I know of is the setting of the retransmission timers for DTLS in particular, because in 1.2, the mechanism for dealing with lost packets was different than it is now in 1.3, so it's more fine-grained from a granularity point of view in 1.3, and there we might actually need to do some experiments to see what the implications are. I just wanted to make you guys aware of this, and there are these issues, and if you have some comments, just drop a mail to the list or send us a mail.
So please bring them to the list so that discussion can be started.
Will do.
Okay, thank you.
This is Peter. Just hello, Hannes. To follow up on your first question there, we did talk with the authors of that CFRG draft, and they are going to incorporate some AEAD updates to the text, but this was with regard to the issue that we raised for 7525 bis. I have not personally looked at the IoT profile thing in a while, so I will endeavor to do that.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, it's the AED limits document in CFRG is quite good and detailed. Obviously, references the literature there, and in a nutshell, we had a discussion with John, and he believes that the analysis or the summary of those papers is incorrect. I haven't had the time to sort of read through the papers and make up my own mind on this, but it may be worthwhile to, if some of you could do that, so we actually are informed about what the issue is rather than only the authors of that CFRG document and John. It of course takes some time.
Okay, Watson.
Hello, Watson here. I agree with that, Hannah, that there might be more work. I'm just not sure that we still would need UTA. Like, it might be at the most appropriate venue to continue this after we publish these 2 documents would be back in TLS. Now TLS 1.3 is out and DTLS 1.3 is out. And it's shifted back to the pattern it was before the start of creation of TLS. It's sort of weird to have 2 groups devoted to TLS.
Well, thank you for your opinion. Well, I think it can be discussed, and I think that it is Francesca who decided, who has the last hand, whether this group should persist or not. So, Watson, are you still okay? Roman?
Speaking as the SEC AD, not as the responsible AD, who's Francesca. I mean, there's a long history here from UTA, which is not necessarily to polish on the TLS protocol side, but really help the applications that are leveraging it, which is what the origin of some of the more historical documents, and certainly why we're doing kind of the BIS here, because this is about application kind of guidance. To me, the existence of the working group, frankly, continues to be helpful as long as we can identify application guidance that needs to be provided. So there's a long historical pedigree here, and it's just a matter of what's left. Thanks.
Thank you. Actually, it's very close to my opinion on the relation between TLS and UTA, because TLS just defines a protocol and UTA makes a lot of recommendations how this protocol should be used in real applications. That's the difference. So they don't duplicate each other. Well, I think we have finished all the agenda items, so we're done. 15 minutes ahead of time. So I encourage everybody who had presentations today to bring open issues to the list, to have a discussion on the list, because for quite a lot of time the activity on the list was quite low, but recently we have very lively discussions on the documents of 6125 bis, and it's a good thing. So please continue. And so I think that's all. Thanks to everybody, and see you. Bye bye.